Welcome back. Our next session for the day is a panel discussion on giving back and the future of sport. The panel will discuss the role of sport, athletes, sports organizations, and sports brands in society and their changed roles in a post-COVID world. The panel will look at the structural issues holding back athletes from participating more wholly in the politics of life and sport, and how to go about building a culture of giving back within the sports community. Our panelists today are Ms. Anjum Moudgil, Indian shooter, Arjuna Award winner, Commonwealth Games and World Championships medalist. Ms. Manasi Joshi, Para-Badminton player, gold medalist at Para-Badminton World Championships and Asian Para Games medalist. Mr. Craig Foster, former player for the Australian men's national soccer team and founder, Play for Lives. He was instrumental in campaigning for and securing the release of Bahraini footballer Hakeem Al-Arabi. Mr. Kiran Khalap, co-founder and managing director, Chlorophyll brand and communications consultancy, and chairman of the board, Meraki Sport and Entertainment. Mr. Niccolo Campriani, triple Olympic gold medalist in shooting, senior sports intelligence manager at the International Olympic Committee, and founder, Make a Mark. He is currently training refugee shooters qualify for the Tokyo 2020 Olympics as part of the Refugee Olympic team. And the moderator for the session, Nandan Kamath, Director at the Sports Law and Policy Center, Managing Trustee, GoSports Foundation, and Principal Lawyer at LawNK. If you do have any questions during this session, do drop in your questions in the Q&A box below, and our panelists will try to answer some of them. Over to Nandan and the panelists.
Thank you so much, Shan, and welcome to all our panelists. I think I have a luxury of riches here, but with limited time, so I really have a significant responsibility to make this hour meaningful. But just to give a precursor and an introduction, I like a famous quote by Arrigo Sacchi, the Italian football coach, who said that football is the most important of the unimportant things in life. We also have philosopher Bernard Suits, who says that really sports is about participants attempting to solve unnecessary problems just for the sake of solving those problems. So these are, society has imposed some rules and we're just solving unnecessary problems in sport. But at the same time, sport is inspiring, sport pushes us to excellence, sport makes us do things we wouldn't have otherwise done, and sport gets us in touch with ourselves. But what it also does in many ways, it helps individuals understand their communities, their roles in society, and how they get to where they do with society playing a role. This leads to an interesting relationship between athlete and society, and a relationship that an athlete has to evolve and develop with equity, power, fairness, and various values that underpin sport itself, but are also issues that society often deals with and has to address. And to discuss these issues and the roles of athletes, the role of sports brands, the role of sports organizations, really connecting back into the societies that created them, the societies that support them, the societies that give them the adulation that makes them commercial products. We have a fantastic panel today, and I'd like to start with Anjum. Anjum, could you tell us a little bit about your journey to becoming an elite shooter? How did you get started? And really the participation in sport, what has it taught you about yourself And what has it taught you about sport in general?
Hello, everyone. Hi, Manasi. Hi, sir. Hi, Niccolo. It's good to be with you all. Yeah, so for me, I started my shooting journey around 12 years ago. It just started by my mother, like taking me to the shooting range and introducing me to the sport, and just the feeling of shooting a live shot, a bullet, was really interesting for me. It was way apart from the other things I used to do in school and everything. So I think that's the reason I just stuck to the game and continued playing it. And for me, this sport has taught me to be, I mean, for like the shooting, it's a sport in which there's no one else to be blamed for anything. It's the individuality of the game that whatever you do, it's you are to be blamed, whether it's good or bad. So I think that is the reason I play this sport, and it has given me everything I have right now, be it recognition or confidence, or it's just changed my life. So I think sports has a very major impact on my life, apart from sports also.
So certainly wouldn't consider it meaningless.
No, not at all.
But Anjum, you've done something quite proactive with your time during lockdown. It's limited your ability to train. But from what I understand, you've been working to develop your artistic pursuits and actually auctioning your paintings and giving the proceeds back to people in need at this point of time during COVID-19. What motivated you to do this? How did you think of this? And really, what drove you to this project?
Yeah, so there were, when this COVID started, there were many people donating for the PM fund or different funds. So I just thought to do something of same sort. And also there are many people who want to donate, but they think that a little amount is it's too less to donate. So I just thought, why not encourage all the people to donate as small amount as possible, because even 1 penny matters. So I just thought of the idea. I put it on Instagram that whoever wants to order any paintings or diaries can order, and all the money I'll make from the diaries, I'll be donating it. So I donated some of the funds to an NGO who were feeding some families during the lockdown in Punjab, and also to a family, my mother's sports. So their kid has cancer, so they're not able to get proper treatment. So I just thought, why not help people? Because there was no expenditure as such, staying at home 3 months. I just sort of putting that money to good use. So it's just the conditions nowadays all over the world just made me, motivated me to do something for the society.
And you're also the beneficiary of a lot of support, right? As you go along, from the government stop scheme, from GoSports and others. Did that make you in some sense conscious that you're also carrying in some sense a public obligation as a sports person? Do you feel like your job is to just go out and perform? Or is there sort of a broader role you see for athletes in general?
There is a broader, there is a lot of things that athletes can do. It's not like we also have a responsibility to play for the country. We represent our families, our nation. We represent specific organizations. We get support from them. I think the support that we get from different people, be it the government or GoSports, for me, it's like a support that encourages us to, play what we love, and also to be responsible enough to motivate people and younger generation to play a sport or do what they love. So for me, it's like strengthening the foundations, the government and the NGOs and everyone who support athletes. They strengthen the people to play a sport. And for me, for an athlete, it's more like motivating people to do what they love. It's not only like previously it used to be only academics that people used to motivate, but now seeing senior athletes here, they just motivate people to be active and just staying active and playing a sport. So I think that is a very important role the athletes nowadays are doing.
Fantastic, Anjum. Manasi, if I may come to you next, you have quite an unusual journey from software engineer to world champion. Can you tell us a little bit about it, your journey, what it's taught you about yourself, what it's taught you about the power of sport?
So, hi, Nandan sir, and hi, all the esteemed panelists. Yes, my journey has been it has been almost 10 years, almost 9 years that I'm living a life as with a disability. And I was a software engineer. I'm a software engineer since 2010. I have lived in Anushakti Nagar in Mumbai, that BARC colony. So my father was a nuclear scientist, and everybody around me were either were definitely motivated to pursue education more and give importance to all other overall development like music, arts, and of course sports. So in my family we chose sports for overall development. I remember when I was in class 10 and I was preparing for my examinations, my father and mother would say, go down and play, because in our household everything was given that much of importance. I used to not only competitively, we were not only asked to be more competitive in school, but also in all the other areas and in sports also. So sports has taught me a lot of things. I'll say when sports has taught me how to learn and give my 100%, disability has taught me how to unlearn. So I met with an accident in December 2011 on my way to work, and unfortunately in that accident I had to undergo amputation and I had to lose my leg to it. When I had my plans after my engineering, I had a plan of after my finishing engineering I should get a good job. When I was doing my job, I was already had risen to a level of team lead in very few years. Even after my injury, I had risen to a very good level in my organization. But sports always stayed with me because that is what I identified myself as a person who was a badminton player. That it kept me different in my school, college, etc. So sports has also helped me to take more risks, be a more risk-taking person. So when I chose badminton and pursued it, it was very difficult, because when my ambition was to rise in an organization, within 1 year of my accident, I had to relearn everything, right from walking, and all the ambitions that I had to I had to plan everything, replan it again. So I chose sports in my rehabilitation. I worked hard. I took a lot of risk. I left my job, a very secure job, which was giving me a good identity and a good stability. I left it because I felt I wanted to know how much I could push myself harder and know what my limitations were. Within a few years, I realized whatever limitations I thought earlier in my journey, I realized that those limitations were nothing. I realized that with hard work, I was able to accept everything and every situation. So yes, sports has taught me so much. I learned how to say yes and also say a no.
And talking about that, Manasi, I think when we were preparing for this, we had a conversation. And one of the things that really struck me was when we talked about being called a para-athlete. So I asked you whether that hyphenation troubled you or whether it's something you were proud of. And your answer really struck me. Could you tell us a little bit more about your perspective on that?
So yeah, when I call myself as a para-athlete, I say it with full energy. I don't feel ashamed by calling myself as a person with disability or as a person like anything. People, government has called us Divyangjan. People call us as differently able. People call us specially able. There are so many other terminologies hanging around, and I have interacted with people, and people are really scared of what terminology to use. But I feel it's really okay to tell a person that, I mean, I am okay with people calling me as a person with disability, because I feel no shame. I feel I'm proud of whoever I am, because of course, disability is also my newfound identity, but there are more identities to me. I'll say education is an identity, sports is an identity, and with time, my identities are also changing, and I'm proud to take all these identities with me, and also a para athlete, definitely.
Wonderful, Manasi. Thank you so much. Nico, if I can come to you. 3 times gold medalist. For most people, that will be enough. They don't want to see another Olympics. But you go back and have aspirations, but aspirations for other people towards Tokyo. Can you tell us about what began this journey and tell us a little bit about Make a Mark?
Hi everyone. Hi Nandan. Hi Anjum. Hi to all the other panelists. Yes, it's let's say I found a way to go to Tokyo somehow, but I didn't want to compete anymore. So basically, this time I'm gonna try to leave the Olympics through somebody else's eyes. Well, basically, I retired with the last shot at the Olympic final in Rio. It wasn't even a great shot. It was a 9, but I guess the other guy shot an 8, and there you go. That was the third gold medal. And after that, I mean, it was very clear that for me it was over. It was time to move on. And linking to what you discussed also with Anjum in terms of our role as athletes in society, I started to try to justify 16 years spent staring at a piece of paper, because it's an awful amount of time. I don't know, many thousands of hours that I spend staring at a target, and of course then it cannot come down to the number of medals. And then I look into my career, and thanks to shooting sport, I spent a few more weekends with my dad. I had the opportunity to get a scholarship, study in US, meet amazing mentors. So it was really now what, and I refuse also the idea to stop my career as athlete with the last shot as an active athlete. So I knew that there was a refugee team in Rio. It was the very first time that the IOC put together a delegation of refugees. It was 10 athletes competing in 3 sports. And the refugee cause is very close to my heart. As an Italian, it's one of the hot topic. Is always on the front page. I always contributed as a donor, supporting UNHCR, the UN Agency of Refugees, and yeah, I mean, at that point I had a network at my disposal. I knew my sport. I've been coaching myself and teammates for many years. So I thought maybe I could try to help a few refugees to reach the minimum qualifying score for Tokyo. And it was a bit of a project within a project, because that itself is a bit of an achievement, try to reach the minimum qualifying score in 1 year. All of a sudden we have 2 years. So that's a bit of extra time for us. But we selected 3 refugees that live where I work in Switzerland, in Lausanne. 3 amazing human beings, and has been quite a journey. And we still have half a journey in front of us. An amazing experience, really.
And to that extent, Nico, what opportunity does Make a Mark have to send a signal to, one, the sports world, but more the world at large? Is there a message? Are you just doing it because it feels right? Are you hoping to achieve some objective?
Yeah, so so Make a Mark is really important to leave a legacy. We don't want the project to finish with Tokyo 2020. We would like to inspire the next Olympic champion, and it doesn't have to be a gold medalist. I mean, the next elite athletes to do something similar with the local community of refugees. Once again, it doesn't have to be an Italian, and it doesn't have to be a sports shooter. When I say we, it's because I have a bit of a team with me. It's a group of friends and colleagues that are spending their free time to support the project. One of them is Abhinav Vindra, who has been my rival training mate and friend for many years. And his support, I mean, has been a bit of a game changer for us. And to be honest, it's amazing how good ideas attract good people. It was a very simple idea. First of all, let's try to see if we can manage to collect all the equipment that we need, and then the donations started to come. And I take the opportunity to thank you and Sport Law and Policy Center as well for the support. We don't want this to finish here. And for me, it's very much a win-win type of scenario. I mean, of course, it's great for Madi, Kaula, Luna. These are the names of our athletes to go through this experience with us. But it's as I said, it's an amazing way for me and Abhinav also to come to some closure with our sport career and to feel that it was worth it. And that we played this role into society. So I really invite the elite athlete to see this as an opportunity also for themselves to transition in a smooth way, as smooth as possible, as smooth as it can be, and give back.
Fantastic, Nico. Craig, if I may come to you next, someone who's inspired me personally, just like Nico has. Couple of your projects recently, Game Over and Play for Lives. Can you tell us about these two initiatives? What got you to work on them? Was this a natural progression from your work with Hakeem a couple of years ago? And what are you seeking to achieve?
Well, what am I seeking to achieve here is to learn from everyone who's on this panel, who's very esteemed, and I've enjoyed hearing from Anjum, Manasi and Niccolo, all of them. Incredible work from all of you. You know, I really respect what you're doing. Anytime that any athlete turns around and gives back to either their sport or broader society, it's always very special. I do think we have an obligation to do so. I'm just looking at seeing what the shirts are that people are wearing. You might notice I'm wearing our Australian shirt today because, as you know, yesterday we've been awarded the Women's World Cup. And so it's probably a good moment to talk about that within this context, because the question for that World Cup then is the same question that Niccolo and I and Anjum and everyone has to confront. And that is, do we work for social causes in and through sport, or should sport contribute to social causes more widely? And sport, in my view, has always struggled in this space. This is why, one of the most famous protests by athletes that ever occurred and has really come to the fore in recent weeks during the Black Lives Matter protest was, Smith and Carlos. And of course, there was an Australian there, Peter Norman, who stood with them. And it was not uncommon. In fact, it was very common for players to make social protests and be ostracized by sport. All of sport is just one example. And the questions happening today, though, I think there's quite a bit of significant change in this area, and sport's being really confronted by athletes now who are saying, well, it's this shut up and dribble that you heard about in US, and Colin Kaepernick takes a knee during a sporting contest, protesting racial inequality at a time when it's not as so socially acceptable in US, and he spends 4 years of his career out. He's now a national, if not a global hero of sorts. And I think it's just astounding and incredibly commendable what he did. He took significant personal risk to try and help what he considers a part of the community which he is a member of, whose human rights are being breached, and he sees that he has a platform and an opportunity to help, and he feels compelled to do so. Now, that's a small section of the population of any country, but when that comes out of sports, whose values and principles are so widely propagated and espoused by everyone, and I might say by all the athletes here, are deeply believed in, when they live those principles in broader society, I think it's very special. And you've seen sport have to adapt to this now. The NFL made a statement and players came out, their own athletes came out, issued a video and said, we're not happy with that. Okay, we're not happy with the talk anymore. You must walk. And so this is starting to happen around the world, and I hope this trend continues. Why have I mentioned the Women's World Cup? Because I'm just writing a piece today about what is the real legacy of a Women's World Cup then? Is it only for football? And our Women's World Cup bid document in Australia, and all of the rhetoric around this so far, is around gender equality, but largely in sport, and by saying that we're going to increase the number of young girls playing and to hopefully reach a gender equity. And as you heard from our incredible Catherine Gill, who's a Deputy CEO of our Professional Players Union, of which I used to be a chairman, that's also now extended to our national teams through advocacy by players. The sport would never have come to that if our female players did not collectivise and say, we want gender parity and we're going to convince the guys that that's good and they took the sport with them. That's very important. Most of these social progress through sport, I would say, comes out of athletes making that happen. Okay, unfortunately, the first ones who go usually have to take significant risk. So there's a number of ways that this World Cup could contribute to society more broadly in Australia. This could be the social justice World Cup. This could be the gender equality across all of society World Cup. This could be, and so that's the question I think that sport is wrestling with. I have a clear view on it. I believe that sport has an obligation to the society that supports us. We do not exist in a vacuum. And many athletes, including in the sport I'm in, football, like entertainers, they rely on society for earning quite extraordinary, incalculable sums of money these days. That doesn't come from nowhere. It comes from people who you are in some way bound to, or you have some responsibility to, in my view. So when people turn around, and so, how sport has, and I'll finish here, I really want to learn from all the others. But what I'll say is, so what sport's traditionally done is we create our own foundations, and that's great. And we have all of these programs within sport, and we have Indigenous, and, I've worked in all of them here, and homeless, and, sport people are wonderful people. We try and help as much as possible. But at some stage, you also say, all right, I'm helping in this field, and this is going okay in sport, but the rest of society is suffering. Okay, so we've got Indigenous programs or Black Lives programs in NFL, but, we have no racial equality in society. I work in the asylum seekers and refugee space a lot because Australia's doing some horrible work in this regard. And, we had a campaign around Hakeem as a refugee. So sport is doing some good work in this regard, in Australia and elsewhere, but we are treating asylum seekers and refugees horribly just at arm's length. So do we have a responsibility just to try and create a better narrative and picture within sport? Or at some time should sport say, well, in our society, our sport's actually not happy with that. We don't think that's right. Finally, I think a good example, refugees, asylum seekers is one. And of course, that's a growing issue around the world that I think sport can make a very significant impact in. And the other one is climate action. So what sport has done typically is align itself with UN sports and climate framework. And that's 5 principles there. Okay. Number 3 is, I think, number 3 and 5 anyway are around education. And number 5 is advocacy through communication. So what sport does really well is sign up to all these accords and then say, we're going to reduce our emission and do like the really easy stuff that doesn't actually put us at too much risk. Okay. And we get a lot of social capital and social license out of that. Those principles say that sport should be speaking up now for the world to move to implement the Paris Agreement. It says it very clearly. And I don't know, and FIA, FIFA, IOC, World Surfing, there's an AFL club in Australia called Richmond's, a wonderful club. Their signatories, there's a huge amount of signatories. I'm not too aware of many of those who are actually advocating publicly. In the document, the second objective is utilising the power of sport, the social power of sport, to engage people around the world and empower change. So that's where sport stops. And I'm interested where that line lies. I think it's different in each country, including in India, but sport is now tipping that balance over, and that's coming from athletes, and I think it's brilliant.
Yeah, and Craig, just in terms of social relevance of sport, we're going to see a couple of difficult years, at least for the brand of sport itself. Does society look at sport as a necessity? Is it something that's a priority? And in that sense, giving back and going back to your community, it may have been an opportunity. Today, you characterize it as an obligation. But at some point, is it going to be an existential necessity for sport to prove its value back, saying that it's not just what's happening on the ground, we are not unimportant. We are just an important part of the fabric of social life.
Yeah, so sport has existed. There's a concept called externalism or exceptionalism of sport.
Yes.
Okay, and what sport says is you know, and we say in sport that we are apolitical, but everyone who's in sport knows that it's deeply and endemically political. I mean, you know, we've just won the FIFA World Cup bid, and two prime ministers, the head of state of Australia is still British monarchy, but two prime ministers were actually on the call trying to advocate to get that World Cup. So the world of sport at the global level, as anyone who works in it will quickly tell you, is incredibly political, like any global organisation, including the UN or others. But then it says, so, you know, but when it comes to all of these social issues, it likes to then characterise them as political. That's where human rights come in, and which are so important, because human rights are apolitical. And what we often say here in Australia anyway is, and what you see in the Black Lives Matter movement, it's got nothing to do with the US government per se. It's about the rights of the people. And every athlete, like anyone else in society, has a human right to advocate for the rights of others. And it just so happens that in order to change that, you have to change the policy of the US government. It's the same in asylum seekers and refugees here. They have rights under international law. Just because this particular government or the Formula One has the Formula One has certain policy in place, that's immaterial to us. These are human beings, and sport is about all of these principles, isn't it? Sport is about equality. Sport is about opportunity. Sport is about, you know, equality in all its forms. And at some point, put it this way, if the world is burning, then at what stage does it get hot enough when sport decides to actually speak up and say something? So the exceptionalism of sport says that we exist outside of society and we don't touch social issues. But what happens when those social issues is the actual well-being of your planet? At what point is sport actually going to not sign the agreements? It's going to actually join the fight. That's a question I think sport's going to have to face pretty quickly in the next couple of years.
Fantastic. Mr. Khalap, if I may come to you, you've helped create, nurture some of the top brands in the country, working with branding, brand story, brand promise. A question I'd like to ask you with respect to sport is, you know, in their day jobs, athletes are expected to play by the rules. There's a lane you have to swim in, there's a lane you have to run in, sort of anything you do outside of that is a penalty. But at the same time, we have expectations of them being exceptional people, breaking records, right? But in their behavior outside, there's also this concept of stay in your lane. So Mr. Khalap, what is your perception on this? There's a duality. We set the rules and you play by them, but try and break the records. And outside of sport, does this duality in many ways limit the ability of sports people to talk about or engage themselves in social, political, and economic life outside of sport?
So, Nandan, I hope your keen eye has noticed the climbing rope behind me. That's just to tell the world that it is now part of the Olympics and it's my sport. I was actually going to wear the Brazil jersey given to me by Meraki, but unfortunately that is now in the office. It was signed by Pele.
Wonderful.
So to come to the question you asked me, I like the word, the duality. And let me begin with that duality. I think the word individual, by definition, means that which cannot be divided. But somehow we've swallowed this concept that, especially in the corporate world, that you can be a vicious shark in your business life and a playful dolphin at home. This is not possible, correct? And this division of human being versus the role that the human being plays is untenable. It is false. It is the same person. So when you think of whether it's the positive of the sports person or the negative, it is the human being who's making that decision, right? He might have that role. So recently I watched a documentary about one gentleman called Larry Pressa, who sexually molested 500 US gymnasts when they were very young, destroying their very sense of themselves. Was this a physiotherapist doctor in his role, or was it a human being? Correct? Same thing with Lance Armstrong. Who was transgressing those rules? So I think there is only one thing, which is the human being, which is the individual, which cannot be divided. And I would like to step out, like you asked me to, and say that this is applicable to other aspects of life. So Picasso did Guernica, which is about, this very famous painting, 20 feet by 30 feet, which is about war. But out of the 7 women in his life, 2 committed suicide and 2 went mad. So is his role as a painter more critical, or is he as a human being more critical? That's the way I look at it. So otherwise, we would have to ask this question of any other role. Just as sportsmen, society contributes to the creation of sport, society also contributes, especially in India. Each of the government spends at least 1 crore or 2 crores creating medical practitioners. So should they be held responsible separately, because they are medical practitioners, to have a view or not have a view about what's happening in the country? So to me, the division itself is untenable. So long as you're a human being, you would have to react to what is happening around you. The degree to which you react and the way in which you react will depend on who you are as a human being. I mean, right in front of us, we have Anjum, who has contributed totally differently, right? So to contribute to COVID, she's done her paintings and raised money through that. That's unconnected to her as being a sports person. Therefore, to me, it's a very simple answer that we are undivided. We are individuals, human beings, and the roles that human beings have to play in society has to be played, whether you're a medical practitioner, whether you're a sports person, or whether you're a brand consultant like me.
Wonderful. And Mr. Khalap, another question in terms of the reality of many athletes in India. Many will rise above the normal. So the normal standard of living, the normal sort of social sort of power one might have from quite humble beginnings. We know a lot of our athletes come from smaller towns, maybe from meager means, and they become wealthy and influential. Now, this means that they'll find themselves on the other side of structural inequalities. So they were once on the side where they were disempowered, but suddenly they are on the side of power within society.
Empowered.
Now, what options lie before them in terms of both human behavior is brand behavior, but I mean, in many ways, they're in a double bind, right? So if they do exercise philanthropy, in many ways, they are reinforcing the social inequalities. On the other hand, they also separating themselves and are distinguishing themselves from their roots. What are the ways in which athletes can recognize, respect the journey they have traveled, and in many ways continue to be authentic to their journey of having risen out of difficulty?
Yeah, that's a beautiful question. But it would help us answer that better if we do not make it unidimensional, if you don't make it only about money. So if you go back to, have you heard of a gentleman called Babar Ali?
No.
Probably not. So Babar Ali was called by BBC the youngest headmaster on earth. He was 12 years old in Bengal when he would go to school, travel for 2 hours, come back and teach the entire village, which couldn't travel, what he was doing. What was that act, right? He hadn't gone to the other side of the normal. He was part of that, and yet he was sharing. I recently read about cricketer Arun Lal helping one of his Dhobi's sons to go abroad and work. And what was he doing? He wasn't necessarily sharing his cricketing ideas. He was sharing something beyond that. So I would guess whether they cross that line or don't cross it, how they share would not depend on just the money part. They could do things which are relevant to them. I have a triathlete friend, Pradeep Katrodia, superb. He has won many awards. My guess is he lost a beautiful 13-year-old daughter to a very rare disease. My guess is he's going to give back, not necessarily through running or teaching, cycling or swimming, but he's going to give back by talking to other people about their rare disease. So the means in which this so-called privileged athlete or the privileged sports person is going to give back will, again, sorry to sound like a stuck record, will depend upon their values, like brands have values. It will depend upon their values as human beings. They could contribute anyway. So to Niccolo, what is critical is refugees. He could have as well said that women are not empowered, let me look after women. So those are the values that the human being brings into her world of sport. That is how they would give back.
And just to ask the same question I asked Craig, is giving back an opportunity, an obligation, or in some ways an existential necessity?
So if you, since I'm heavily into this words and writing, so I was looking at the root word of sport, and the root word of sport is disport, which is entertainment. My guess is in the post-COVID world, that aspect of sport as entertainment might get compromised, because people would ask, what is the purpose of this? But in India, especially now, Australia is a very sporting nation. Sport is in their DNA. America is a very sporting nation. But in India, where I think 1% of the population, the last figure I read was 10% of the population is physically active, 1% is into sport or athleticism. So the notion of sport as something which is about health is critical, right? And therefore that aspect needs to be deployed by whether it is the sporting body or whether it's a sports person, that it is healthy for your mind and for your body. The aspect of sport that it actually pushes you into excelling and therefore becoming a better human being through that route. That is another dimension of sport that is critical in India today. Overall, though, how are they going to, how will they have this opportunity? There are 3 or 4 mega trends that are going to come up post-COVID in these times of crisis. One is this entire trend of sustainability, the entire trend of safety, the trend of transparency, and the trend of purpose. I recently read a research report which says India is one of the biggest nations where consumers and employees and other stakeholders are very respectful of the purpose of a body. So can the sport body explain its purpose? What really does it stand for? Is it just, having rich coffers like some of our sports bodies have and not doing much? Or does it have a higher purpose? Can the sport body explain to the normal public that, look, through this, I have changed this entire section. I believe there are sports clubs which have changed the destiny of people in the Northeast. That is purpose. So can sport, and remember, when you say sport, it has to be a human being, because sport is an idea. So can the head of a sport body, can an athlete, can a sports person who has now crossed the line explain the purpose of sport in his eyes or in her eyes? That is the opportunity, because the whole world is saying, for whatever I do, I need to have purpose, because this disease has taught us that you can have money, you can have cars, you can have everything. It's all of no use. It has until your life has some purpose and life has some meaning. So that's the big opportunity, that sports people can now connect to these mega trends, these bigger, meaningful trends that are emerging in society.
Wonderful, Kiran. Anjum, if I may come back to you now, just if you could tell us a little bit about your influences. Are there Indian and international athletes who you have modeled yourself around their work? You've actually followed what they do around sport, not just in sport. Are there people you look at and say, one day I want to grow up and be like this person?
Yeah. So when I started the sport, I never knew anyone, even anyone out of India, any athletes or something. So, but I really admire many athletes now, since we have been into international circuit now. So one of them is surely Niccolo, not because he's here, I'm talking about him, just because I met him in, in Mumbai Mumbai. I actually had a deep talk with someone from another country, same sport and everything. So it really, fascinated me how every champion, be it any, like we can say champion related to a medal or something, everyone is so different how they deal with, their stardom or their game and everything. So for me, the way he has, he described his life and the way he's giving back to the sport has really, really, fascinated. I've also met the person, the refugee. He is training in Doha, and I was amazed how eager they are to go and play for Tokyo. So I think that journey of a refugee coming from a very different state to a place where they're playing for themselves and representing a game, it's just amazing. And also I like some athletes who are there in army and police, and during a crisis or something, they go back to their jobs and support their people and everything. So since I'm also into police, and I did not do my training, but I'm not able to go out there in the field and help people. That is the reason I just wanted to do something that I was feeling not good, being into police but not going out there and helping anyone. So that is the reason I did it through my painting. So that is how many athletes across the country who go out and support play a sport for their nation, and also are into paramilitary forces or anything so like that. So there are many to name, but there are many people who I admire. It's just because they focus on their life apart from sport. That is what I really focus on, because sport is a part of a life, but there are so many things we can learn and spread our knowledge and just give back to our life and everyone around us. Yeah.
And Anjum, you have a long and I'm sure successful career ahead of you, but at the end of that, how would you like to be remembered?
So for me, I really want, like, this is one thing I really thought about quite some years back, that what I want back or leave a legacy in this sport. I don't want someone to remember me for my medals or any scores or something. I really want people to remember the way I shoot, be it a single shot, the way I stand there, the way I focus and handle the challenges and the pressures. And because I love challenges, some people don't do all the events of rifle, but I do all of them because it just challenging for someone, but it just motivates me to go there and just do it what others don't feel comfortable to do. So for me, being remembered for someone who is a treat to watch while playing a sport, and also someone who should be remembered for making good number of records. I love making records. So I would do that. And also someone who motivates people to just go out there and enjoy whatever they do, and not do anything just for the sake of doing it. They should enjoy, and if they don't enjoy that thing, it should they should just leave it. So for me, it's that the people should remember me for.
Fantastic. Manasi, you are world champion, but you're also passionate about a number of things off court. Can you tell us about what is it that excites you in your endeavors off the court? What are the targets Manasi Joshi is setting for herself? She wanted to be world champion, is now world champion. What next? What can we expect?
I know, like, as athletes, we get a chance for our voice to get amplified. And there are a few causes which are really close to me. One is road safety, because I feel a lot has to be done in India. And I feel a lot could have changed. I mean, my life could have been different if we had road safety rules and everything in place. So I'm really close. That cause is very close to my heart. Another thing which is really important to me is about how we get support for prosthesis in our country. Like, prosthesis are super expensive. We don't have any insurance for that. Like, I spend almost 20 to 25 lakhs I mean, I have to spend that kind of money for every 5 years. I don't think everybody can do that, right? It's a life saving we have to put in, and I don't think anybody has that kind of saving. So I wish that we get prosthesis as a part of insurance support for whoever has a disability at a later stage of their life. Also, I believe there are a lot of income tax laws which needs to be changed based depending on the support that government gives for the prosthetic equipment. Currently, we pay around 18%. We pay 5% of GST on prosthesis. I feel it's like people charging us a tax to work. I think we should be getting all those tax free in future. So that is one more cause which is really close to my heart. And I think as para athlete, I really wish to change how disability and para sports is perceived in India. I wish it is not just treated as a charity, and how it's treated as a brand, just like Mr. Karan Khalap has said. So I wish to change all these things, and of course, it is going to take a lot of time, and there will come a support from people who are listening to this session and people all around who listen to us and call other people with disabilities. They join together and they believe in this cause. I feel that my idea will be to change all these things, and this is one, like, these are the areas which I'm very passionate about, off the court or off the field.
Fantastic, Manasi. And the same question I asked Anjum: how would you like people to remember you at the end of your career?
So if I be able to change whatever the three things I said, of course, I would wish to be remembered as a person who is changing. Like, it is okay to change your identities with time, and I want to be remembered as a front runner in this game of para sports in future. I also want people to realize that it's okay to lose anything. I mean, I know I have met people who lose a lot of things, like people lose their loved one, people undergo breakups, people I mean, there are so many things and disadvantage a person faces in their life, and I wish by knowing my story, a person realizes that it is okay to lose anything, and we are not defined by what we lose, but we are more defined by what we do with our time in the best possible way. So I want to be remembered. Like, of course, badminton, para sports, I don't know if I will be, I want to change all these things, but to be remembered in a field, this is where I want to be remembered as.
Wonderful, Manasi. Nico, if I may come back to you. You talk to most elite athletes, they talk about the need to be selfish during a career. There's very little chance of succeeding unless you're selfish about your training requirements, training needs. In many ways, you need to make sure that the world revolves around you. Now, was that a perspective you would agree with? And has that changed post-retirement? In many ways, when you look back on sport, do you feel like your attitude has changed? Has it remained the same, but you've just got more time to exercise the attitude you already had? How does selfishness play in, and not necessarily as a bad thing?
Yeah, well, it's a good question, especially to a shooter. I mean, we're very much an individual sport, and we spend a lot of time with ourselves. We put earplugs, and that's it. We leave the world outside, and it all comes down to the mental energy that you have when it comes to the Olympic Games. I mean, I would say that in our sport, at least 20 to
Sorry, Nico, I think we've lost you.
Hello.
Yeah, Nico, we lost you for a second. Please come back.
Yeah. So when it comes to our sport, it really, you are responsible to go to the games with full batteries, and yeah, you need to be able to shut down what is not necessary for that day. At the same time,
So I think once we'll have Nico back, but Craig, if I may just come to you until I get back to Craig, what do you think are the structural issues holding back athletes from participating more wholly in things outside of their sport, and what can be done to change these dynamics?
Well, the sport's entire structure and culture in many countries, and certainly at the global level, is largely predicated against athletes participating in social and certainly what sport would see as political issues outside the sport. And one of the reasons for that, whilst we went as far back as '68, but certainly I think in the last couple of decades, is the field that Kiran who spoke very eloquently, and that is of sponsorship and commercial revenue and the commercialization of sport in recent decades. So the sponsors have been able to exert a very significant amount of pressure on sport for athletes not to say anything which they would deem inappropriate according to their value system. Now, if we go to what's happening in the world today and the response of many corporations around the world to climate change, or indeed to gender equality or to racial equality or any other social issue, we would perhaps question the wisdom of taking moral advice from corporations. And sport has been very largely shaped by this. Whereas in actual fact, in my view, the moral and ethical repository in world sport exists largely with the athletes. And of course, the deeply political environment of global sport means that in order to get to positions of influence, so many things have to be compromised along the way. And a lot of people decide to stay on the outside and advocate in different ways. They're simply not prepared to go through the process. Yeah. So therefore, it's the athletes who quite so often believe so deeply in the principles of sport and actually live those values. This has been the beauty of the Black Lives Matter movement. It's just been wonderful to see the Black American athletes stepping forward and saying, this is where, LeBron James issued this brilliant video that my good friend Brendan Schwab, who you had on earlier today, is always incredibly articulate and very smart. He sent me this video from LeBron, which said, I'm not just bouncing balls now, because someone broadcast there after Trump had attacked Colin Kaepernick for taking a knee, and LeBron said something, and in the public domain, these public commentators were, I would say, echoing the social understanding of sport. They said, just bounce and shut up. And now he's saying, well, listen, we're not staying quiet. This dam has broke, and I believe that it has. So the structures of sport are built to largely keep athletes in their bubble. Now, the question you asked before is a good one around this selfishness and so on. I do also believe that because many athletes, or the vast majority of athletes, are relatively young, let's say between early teens and early 30s, let's say, for, the major global sports, that's a period of their life where the intensity of focus that's required to become an absolute champion or world champion, like the guys you've got on here, Manasi and Niccolo and so on, is so intense that it quite often blocks out a lot of social awareness and social learning and social understanding. And this is why I think human rights training for young athletes is an absolute priority around the world, particularly given where the world is progressing to. And human rights, there is now a human rights policy in FIFA. The Commonwealth Games are doing an outstanding job along with World Players United. And I do think that athletes around the world are going to have to understand this now, because their sport is actually obligated to uphold, these internationally recognised human rights. So that's very much the global trend, and athletes are, I think, going to need to better understand that, and they'll be able to recognise that that's the space in which they play. I might just finish that question with a question, and that is around what Manasi was saying. So the question for sport is, or many athletes, is I'm not sure of what the mechanism Manasi was talking about. It's 5% GST on and so on, and these issues. Okay, some type of I'm not sure if that's wheelchair or
prosthetics.
What is that? Prosthetics? Got it. Okay, so the question then, there's two questions in sport. One is, okay, should Manasi speak out then as a high profile athlete and say, well, look, this is, you know, I require this. Secondly, should she call on her sport to assist her? So if sport, you know, is providing this opportunity, okay, for disabled athletes and, you know, and gaining, I would say, social currency out of this as well, is sport obligated? Is that sport obligated to help Manasi to actually solve that problem? And thirdly, the most important question is, should sport step forward, not just Manasi, and actually help that socially? So if that's occurring to Manasi and all the other athletes in the country, how many young athletes then, young potential athletes, are prohibited from following Manasi's incredible path because they can't afford it?
Yeah.
So does the sport have an obligation to say to India, we believe that this is inappropriate and this should occur? Now that's a social cause now. That's not a sporting cause, okay? And I believe they should. This is the line that, you know, we're constantly talking about. There's an incredible amount of people in sport. They're just amazing human beings who do brilliant work. But there's this whole sector of society who don't play sport who actually need our help as well. And sport should question ourselves. We all have different answers. I'm not saying there's one answer. We all have different answers. But sport is now having to question anyway. Because athletes are saying, the big athletes of the world, the biggest, are now saying to their sports, listen, you got to get in line here, and you've got to advocate with us, or we're going to make a real noise. Look at Megan Rapinoe, who's an absolute champion human being, right? Megan Rapinoe is saying, I'm going to take a knee here, and I'm going to speak out on LGBTI and all of these types of issues. And I absolutely applaud what she's doing. Why? Is because so FIFA, I'll finish with this, but FIFA's slogan is for the game, for the world. So Megan Rapinoe's for the game. She's a world champion winning captain. But is she for the world? Because she's actually trying to improve it. She's actually trying to make the world a better place through her platform that sport's given her. And I think she's doing an incredible job of it.
Fantastic. And Nico, just for you to conclude, and then I'll conclude with Mr. Khalap. I'm conscious of the time that we've overrun a little bit, but last words, Nico.
Yeah, sorry guys, I was borrowing garden and Wi-Fi. I'm on my way back to answer your question. If selfish is critical, in my experience, look, we cannot, and this was discussed before, we cannot divide who you are as an athlete from who you are as a human being. And to be honest, I mean, if you look back at my career, I reached the level that I reached because it was journey with other people, and it was a lot of give and take. I mean, I won the gold medal in Rio with someone else's rifle. Mine wasn't working, so I borrowed it, and I did it because I borrow my rifle in other world. It's not binary, to be honest. It's really not binary. I also see a lot of people that, you know, put all the eggs in one basket and then confuse what they do with the self-esteem. You know, get gold medal, feel like hero, get fourth place, go to depression. I mean, if you develop yourself outside the sport, working outside the field of play, then maybe you have, you know, a higher chance to walk into the Olympic final before the first shot with a smile. And to be honest, that was the trick. I was happy before winning the gold medal, and I won the gold medal because I was happy before. So to be honest, I would say that you know, it's very much functional more than compatible to be active outside the sport. I'm very much in line with what Craig said. I do feel the responsibility. I think it is in the job description, not only of the athletes, but we have coaches that they have to realize that their job goes beyond technical advice, that they are real educators. So I think we have to accept that this is the job description. I would, as much as possible, though, try to sell it as a unique opportunity. At the end of the day, we have so much to gain.
Fantastic. And last word, Mr. Khalap, in these times where there's going to be widespread social and economic strife among fellow citizens, how can athletes, sports brands, sports organizations behave both authentically as well as empathetically in dealing with the reality of so many others? You're on mute, Mr. Khalap, just to go off.
Like I mentioned earlier, it is while strife is one problem part of it, the opportunity of it is the rising of consciousness of all the issues that plague us. So it has brought us face to face with many of the things which we now realize are unnecessary. And if sport, and again, as I said, sport is a concept, like society is a concept. It is finally, we are talking about sportsmen or the people who head sports bodies. If they can take this opportunity to first look at themselves, because authenticity comes from questioning your own intention. Like Craig said, are you into being a conduit for large corporations to connect with large number of consumers, or are you somebody who's going to enable and change human life itself? The biggest issue in India, let's say, is poverty, is discrimination. Are these issues that are now, which are come up, where we are more actively conscious about all those issues? Can sport now connect to that, rather just be a form of entertainment, a form where people come, blow whistles and go back home? We can turn the tide if sport can say that, yes, now that there are more people willing to listen about these issues, there are more people who understand the gender inequality, more people who understand I am part of an organization which is about child sexual abuse. So more and more people are more conscious about the issues that face us as human beings. Can sport then turn around and say, okay, I have many people who inspire human beings, let me use them to create greater consciousness about this? Can I provide a conduit, not for just corporations to connect to consumers, but can I provide a conduit for my fellow human beings to be raised from wherever they are? So it's actually a huge opportunity when overall there was a philosopher called Chardin who invented this concept called noosphere. Like we have atmosphere and ionosphere, he invented this phrase called noosphere, which is a layer of consciousness around the earth. So that layer currently has all these issues sitting in it. Most of us who are open to media, more than 67% of earth is now on internet. So we are all connected in that way. These issues are now real. Everybody has understood the discrimination by color. Everybody has understood discrimination by gender. Sport can take this, first look at itself, examine its own intentions, then make it clear to the rest of the world what its intentions are, that I'm going to change from just entertainment to upliftment. Can I aggregate and elevate? That would be what sports' final aim could be.
Fantastic. What a lovely note to end on. I'd like to thank all our panelists, Anjum, Manasi, Nico, Craig, Mr. Khalap. Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us, and each of you inspiring us in different ways.